Now, Turkey will soon close its borders with Iraq's Kurdistan region and shut its airspace in response to last week's secession vote there. Now, the announcement was made by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He added that the referendum shows, quote, perfect ingratitude of the Kurdish regional government. Erdogan condemned the referendum and urged Iraq's Kurdistan region to draw a lesson from its mistake and make up for it as soon as possible. Now, flights from Turkey to northern Iraq have been suspended since the Kurdish secession vote on September 25th. Turkish president earlier said that Ankara, Tehran, and Baghdad will jointly make a decision on closing the flow of oil from Iraq's Kurdish region over this referendum. He made the remarks after his one-day trip to Iran on Wednesday. And we're joined out of Washington now, by Mr. James Yawashawn, former U.S. Senate foreign policy analyst. Hello, sir, and thank you for joining us back on the program, Mr. Yawashawn. Now, my question to you, why does it seem that Ankara is taking the harshest stance with respect to the secession vote?
Well, I think they're in a position to do it. I think the cutting off flights and closing the border is a shot across their bow. But as the news story mentioned, the real hammer to drop is that they cut off the Kurdish regional government's oil exports, because those have to go through Turkey. The Kurds don't want to share those revenues with the Baghdad government. Without that ability to export that oil, there really is not a whole lot of economic viability to this now declared independent Kurdistan.
And why is it that almost every country except for, well, not a country, but for the regime that we see in Tel Aviv is opposed to the Kurds doing this at this time in history?
Well, to start with, most of the states involved, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and of course Turkey itself, have themselves substantial Kurdish populations, and they're afraid that if there is a viable independent Kurdistan carved out of Iraqi territory, that will then become a magnet to attract their compatriots in neighboring countries, and that then endangers the territorial integrity of those states as well.
What about the precedent that's being set when you start divvying up countries along ethnic or religious or sectarian lines? Doesn't that promote, I mean, a lot of these countries are extremely rich and diverse in their cultural aspects, and if they start trying to break off, what would we have? We'd have a Middle East split up in hundreds of pieces.
Well, let's go back to Kosovo in 2008, when a lot of people warned that forcibly and illegally detaching a province from a sovereign country against its will, without its agreement, was going to set a precedent. And the United States in particular, which drove that, said, oh, no, 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 this is a unique case. Well, it didn't turn out to be so unique, did it, in South Ossetia and Abkhazia? And I think we could then point to Crimea as well, is that once the separatist virus is out of the bottle, it tends to spread. It's not like Kurdistan, but just in this very same week, we saw what happened in Catalonia in Spain. So I think there is a challenge now being mounted to the principle of the sovereign nation state, and there are a lot of people that applaud the idea that any ethnic minority can declare its independence anytime it wants to, and they have a positive right to do so. In my opinion, that's a very dangerous concept.
And, you know, Spain's not dealing with a war on terror. You know, Iraq's really caught up in a really vicious conflict with Daesh, and a lot of people say because of that, it's really the worst time for Iraq's Kurdistan region to try to capitalize on the instability in the region.
Well, it may be the worst time for Baghdad, but it's the best time for Kurdistan. Clearly, when we have Daesh being pushed out of areas that they had held, it's an opportunity for the Kurdish forces to move in. By the way, we could say the same thing what we're seeing right now in eastern Syria, where U.S.-sponsored Kurdish forces are racing south and east in order to block the Syrian army from oil fields in eastern Syria on the other side of the Euphrates River. So I think that the Kurds are being used as a cat's paw from the outside, and I think it's very dangerous for the region. And frankly, I think it's dangerous for the Kurds too.
Thank you for joining us and for your valuable input, Mr. James Yawashawn, former U.S. Senate foreign policy analyst, joining us out of Washington.